Hello and welcome back to Study Sessions. My name, of course, is Mr. Boff, and in today's episode, we're going to be exploring the poem Tissue by Imtiaz Dharker with a focus on how the poem presents identity. Remember, this episode and all episodes of Study Sessions are designed to support your revision and your completion of exam preparation tasks. Now, in this particular episode, we're going to move through the poem Tissue in three steps. Three steps designed to replicate or mimic how we're going to approach the poem and this anthology task in the exam itself. So we're going to start with an overview of what overall Imtiaz Dharker is saying, what her message is in this poem, but specifically around identity, because that's the question focus. We're going to take a really close look at the title and look specifically at why its multiple meanings really matter to our understanding of this poem. And then finally, we're going to engage in word-level analysis of three key quotations selected from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the poem Tissue. And then, at the end of the episode, we're going to do some reflection, engage in some reflection on why Ozymandias is perhaps a strong comparison for this particular theme and question focus. So, without much further ado, let's begin. Now, starting with the overview and thinking about what Tissue as a poem has to say about identity. It is a poem, I think, that in many ways challenges our usual ideas about identity. It seems, I think, from reading this poem that Imtiaz Dharker isn't interested in identity as something powerful or fixed or permanent. Instead, in this poem, she appears to be suggesting that human identity is fragile, like paper, changeable and always shifting, shaped by culture, memory, and belief, connected to others and not isolated, and open to light. And by that, we might mean or think about something like truth, goodness, and maybe spiritual clarity. So from the very beginning, Dharker emphasizes that true identity isn't found in great big monuments, wealth, or authority, the sorts of things that humans build to prove their importance. Instead, identity is to be found in the delicate, often invisible structures that can shape our lives: names, histories, scripture, religious verse, family, community, and even human touch. So, by linking identity to something as fragile as tissue, Dharker invites us to see human life as something precious, interconnected, fragile, and always open to change. Now, if that's the overview, the next step is to think specifically about that title. So we're going to be thinking about the title of the poem Tissue and thinking in particular about the use of polysemy. It's worth remembering that before we've even got anywhere near reading the poem itself, the main text of the poem, the title is really telling us a great deal about how Dharker wants us to think about identity. Tissue is a polysemous word. It carries several meanings all at once. Each meaning, as we're going to work through them now, strengthens the poem's core extended metaphor. Okay, so tissue, meaning one, paper. Now, this links to records, written records, maps, money, books, and these are the documents that can shape our identity in terms of culture, nation, or indeed religion. Just think, paper is fragile, and it reminds us that these structures are temporary. Meaning two, when we think of tissue, we think of skin, human tissue. Now, this takes the metaphor into the body, the human body. Identity becomes something living, something human, and something vulnerable. It suggests that who we are as people is shaped by emotion, our connection to others, and experience. And then finally, meaning three. Now, tissue can mean fibers or a material that connects things. And I think what this does is it points to the idea that our identity isn't created on our own. It's woven, if you will, from connections to our family, connections to community, connections to our shared history. Now, that's all very well, that's all very good, but why does it matter? I think it matters because the title prepares us for Dharker's central message and, if you will, argument that identity is delicate, it's interconnected, and it's in this state of constantly being rewritten. Tissue and our identity then is something living, and it's something that we as human beings all share. Okay, so we've done our overview of the poem in relation to the question focus. Okay, thinking about identity. Then we've shifted over to the title. Again, thinking about the title connected to the overall focus on identity. Now we move on to word level, close reading, analysis, deep analysis of three key quotations. And our first quotation, quotation number one, is this quote, "Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things." Now, Imtiaz Dharker opens her poem with a gentle and I think a hopeful image, paper letting light shine through. Now, that verb, lets, is important. It's soft. It's about allowing something to happen. And it suggests identity is at its best when we allow openness and transparency, when we're open to others. Light symbolizes truth and goodness. It's a positive force that can pass through fragile paper, hinting that fragility isn't something to be worried about or feared. It's not a weakness. It's the very thing that allows us to change. Then we have that phrase, could alter things. I think that's really significant. That modal verb could shows possibility rather than certainty. Change is available to us, but only if we open ourselves to that change. So in this opening, Dharker is presenting identity as something shaped through this metaphor, shaped by hope, shaped by honesty, shaped by openness and fragility. Okay, we move on. Quotation 2. "If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift, see how easily they fall away on a sigh." Now, I think here Dharker moves away from individual identity to shared, or what we might call collective identity, the structures that human societies build. Again, though, we've got the language of gentleness, like let feels gentle, so too does the verb to drift. It suggests instability, drifting away, but without violence. Everything that appears powerful, and we can include governments, borders, institutions, would drift if made of paper. And that line, fall away on a sigh, is striking because a sigh is so small, so human. It suggests that all our human constructions, even the ones that we think are so permanent and shape national or political identity, are far more delicate than we might pretend. So Dharker's point here is simple. Identity is built on rigid structures that are actually fragile and temporary. Identity built on our shared humanity lasts longer. Okay, last quotation. Here it is, quote, "Raise a structure never meant to last, of paper smoothed and stroked and thinned to be transparent, turned into your skin." In these final stanzas, Dharker brings the metaphor directly here, into the human body. The phrase never meant to last is a reminder of human mortality. Identity is temporary. No one lasts forever, but that doesn't make it meaningless. And those verbs, smoothed and stroked, introduce a sense of tenderness. They show that identity is shaped by human touch, attention, compassion, care, and love. Transparent builds on the light imagery from earlier on. True identity is open, it's honest, and it's vulnerable. It's not hardened or rigid or defensive. And then we reach the real transformation at the end of the poem. Paper becomes skin. The metaphor becomes literal. Imtiaz Dharker fuses fragility with our humanity to show that identity is living, it's changing, and it's intimately connected to the world around us. So the ending then of the poem completes Dharker's message and core argument. Identity isn't something carved in stone. It's something human, fragile, impermanent, delicate, and full of light and with the potential for goodness. Okay, so that's tissue in a nutshell. Where do we go next? Well, we're thinking about poems to compare to tissue. There are lots of poems in the anthology that engage with identity in all sorts of different ways, but I'm going to talk in this episode about the poem Ozymandias. It's one of the comparisons you could make. It's not the only one. There are lots of other poems. I'm thinking particularly like The Emigre, and there's some lovely shared light imagery that you might want to talk about. But I'm going to turn to Ozymandias, and I think this is where contrast becomes really powerful. Because in Ozymandias, Shelley presents a ruler who tries to build his identity through strength, through monuments, the monument of his statue, and through control. Potentially, it's alluded to tyrannical control. He wants to be remembered forever. But the desert, time, nature destroys everything. His statue is shattered. It's a wreck. It's decaying. His identity collapses along with the stone. So where Dharker shows identity as fragile but full of light, Shelley shows identity as powerful but ultimately empty. Dharker suggests identity survives through connection and our shared human fragility. Shelley shows that identity built on power and ego turns to dust. So this is why Ozymandias is such a great point of comparison. Both poems, then, both poets, are showing that human identity is temporary. But Dharker finds hope and optimism in fragility. We should embrace and celebrate that fragility, while Shelley is exposing the foolishness, the folly, the hubris of trying to make one's identity, particularly the egotistical, tyrannical identity of Ozymandias, trying to make that identity permanent, is an act of hubris and foolishness. And so, on that note, that brings us to the end of today's episode. And remember, in summary, tissue is all about fragility, openness, and in many ways, the beauty of human identity. And when you compare it, if you decide to go with Ozymandias, the contrast becomes incredibly clear and I would say incredibly powerful in any exam response. So, as always, thank you so much for listening and keep going with your revision. You're all doing brilliantly. See you next time.